Well, thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. Good afternoon to everybody. I think I was listening to not just the Foreign Minister, but the Minister of Commerce, Trade, and Tourism just now. I am obviously very delighted to be in Havana. And I apologize that we were a little bit late, but this is an historic hotel, and I was taking a moment to look at the extraordinary murals in the other room, which have the pictures or likenesses of an extraordinary number of public leaders and celebrities, people in the arts and film who have come here through the many decades. And it's a great history in itself. As everybody knows, this is an historic moment. Today is an historic day here in Havana, where finally, after more than 54 years, the United States and Cuba have reestablished diplomatic relations. And as I mentioned earlier today, I'm also privileged to be the first Secretary of State to come here since 1945. I think the meeting that we just had, the Foreign Minister and I, underscored this historic moment because it was extremely cooperative, constructive, and both of us operated in a spirit of building on the possibilities that come out of this day. The reestablishment of diplomatic relations and the reopening of our embassies are critical steps in the long process of fully normalizing our bilateral relations. And you heard the Foreign Minister just now talking to you with some detail about the ways in which we hope to capitalize on today in order to move towards that full normalization. The Foreign Minister made it clear that that normalization is dependent, of course, on the lifting of the embargo and other items. And this administration, President Obama and his administration, already advocate for and support the lifting of the embargo. We believe that that is important. When we moved to normalization with Vietnam, one of the first steps was the lifting of the embargo, which President George H.W. Bush engaged in as a first step before President Clinton moved to the next. So it's our hope that over the next days, we will be able to lay out a roadmap whereby steps are taken and make it possible for us to move to the next level. And I am convinced that the steps that we talked about today will advance this relationship in significant ways. First of all, the resumption of our embassy activities is going to permit the United States to engage the Cuban government much more easily on a regular basis. And in fact, today, we already agreed on those next steps. Bruno just announced to you the creation of this steering committee, this mechanism that we will use in order to harness the diplomatic track that brought us to this point. And what we intend to do is begin to meet almost immediately. In the first or second week of September, a delegation will come and we will begin this process of working through a number of different issues. I'm confident also that today is going to be the beginning of an opportunity for Cuban diplomats in Washington, D.C., and American diplomats in Havana to be able to engage more openly with the people who make up both of our countries, and that both diplomats, Cuban and American, will be free to share views, to meet with citizens of all walks of life in the nations to which they are accredited. And this only makes sense because no one who has faith in the validity of his or her own ideas ought to fear the ideas of other people. I want to be clear and I think I said this earlier today, that the normalization of relations is not a favor that we do, one nation to the other. It's something that we do together because both of our citizens, we have determined, have the ability to be able to benefit from the relationship. As people-to-people contacts increase, we believe that normalization will contribute to an empowering of all of our peoples, helping Cuban population to be able to plug into the global economy, to be able to trade more, to be able to move and travel and enjoy the fruits of their labor, to be able to raise the standards of living, and therefore improve their lives. It'll also help citizens from the United States, including students and the private sector, to be able to learn more about this country, to be able to establish friendships and connections that will last, hopefully, for a lifetime. The United States and Cuba, today in our meeting, both agreed that we are determined to look ahead and that the same shared resolve that brought us to the diplomatic agreement to be able to open our embassies is the shared resolve that we will now apply to the process of normalization. Now, the foreign minister and I'll just repeat a couple of things he said, touched on issues of mutual concern, including human rights, which he talked about at some length, the environment, counter-narcotics, maritime safety, and we agreed to establish this bilateral mechanism so we can meet regularly in order to do more than simply talk about the relationship, but to actually take the steps necessary to be able to watch it mature. We will review our common agenda. We will address a number of issues beyond those I've listed, such as civil aviation, claims. There are obviously issues of claims on both sides, by the way, and those need to be worked through. There needs to be a process established for working them through. And the path to full normalization is not always going to be easy. We both understand that. But we're confident that the establishment of our embassies is going to make it easier for our diplomats to work at these difficult issues. And there's no question in my mind it's going to enhance mutual understanding. Normalization between the United States and Cuba will also remove a source of irritation and division within the hemisphere. When we were in Panama last year, I can't tell you how many countries came up to us after the President's announcement and said how happy they are that finally the United States and Cuba are going to move to renew that relationship, because all of them were supportive of and encouraging us to take that kind of step. So this matters to us hemispherically, because countries from Chile to Canada will all be better able to advance a common agenda for our citizens. And that is an agenda that is aimed at lifting people out of poverty, safeguarding health, fighting crime, creating sustainable energy security, advancing human rights, and equipping our young people with the knowledge and the skills that they need in the modern world to be able to succeed and thrive and help build community in their own nations. Today, with the ceremonial flag raising at the embassy, we are taking an historic, and I might add, long overdue step in the right direction. And we are determined to go forward with faith in the people of both of our countries as we begin what we hope will be a very new and a very exciting era for all of us. So thank you very much, Bruno, for your generous welcome today. It's a pleasure for me to be back in Havana, and having driven around and seen the beauty of this city and knowing it previously, but having rekindled that, I can tell you this is going to be one of the great sought-after travel spots of the world. And in my judgment, the sooner we can get to our normalization, the better. Thank you.
Congratulations on the reopening.
Thank you, sir.